Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Andrew Wade downshifted his 18-wheeler as the Portland skyline appeared on the horizon. After 14 days on the road, his body ached for a shower and his own bed. The cab smelled of coffee and fast food, remnants of the 3,000-mile haul from Florida. He rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his phone, sending Bryn a quick text. Home in 30 and no response. Not unusual these days that he guided the massive vehicle through familiar streets until he reached the truck yard. After logging his hours and completing his paperwork with meticulous care, the same attention to detail, he applied to everything. Andrew grabbed his duffel bag and walked to his pickup parked in the employee lot. The drive home took 20 minutes. Andrew rolled down the window, letting the cool Oregon air wash over him. Their modest two-story house came into view, and he noted the unfamiliar luxury sedan in the driveway with a small frown. Darla's car. His mother-in-law was visiting. Again, he parked behind her Mercedes and took a deep breath before heading inside. "Hello?" he called, stepping through the front door. The house smelled of expensive perfume and roasted chicken. In here, Bryn's voice drifted from the kitchen, cool and distant. Andrew walked in to find his wife and her mother seated at the dining table, wine glasses in hand. Dinner sat on the counter, uncovered and cold. "You're late," Bryn said, not bothering to stand. "Traffic," Andrew replied, setting down his bag. He nodded politely to Darla. "Hello, Darla." Darla Holloway barely acknowledged him with a thin smile. "Andrew, how is your driving?" The way she said driving made it sound like he collected garbage for a living. "Profitable," he answered simply, washing his hands at the kitchen sink. His wedding ring clinked against the faucet, a plain band of titanium that Bryn had tried to upgrade multiple times. He'd refused. This was the ring they'd exchanged vows with, and he saw no reason to replace it with something flashier. "Bryn was just telling me about the charity auction next week," Darla said, swirling her wine. "The Prestons will be there. Richard's son just made partner at Callaway and Hughes." Andrew nodded, knowing exactly what this was, another attempt to remind Bryn she could have married better. He served himself a plate of cold chicken and vegetables. "It's a $500 plate dinner," Bryn added, watching him eat standing up. "I bought us tickets." Andrew paused mid-bite. "I'll be in Denver next week." "The McDaniel contract, remember?" Bryn's face hardened. "You can reschedule. This is important." "So is keeping our clients," Andrew replied evenly. "I don't ask them to reschedule when you have gallery openings or fundraisers." "It's not the same thing," Darla interjected. "Those events build connections, Andrew. Connections that could help elevate your situation." Andrew looked at his mother-in-law directly. "My situation is just fine, Darla." He noticed Bryn's phone light up on the table. She quickly flipped it over, but not before he caught the name on the screen. "Nolan, your trainer texting you at 8 p.m.? He asked casually. That Bryn's eyes narrowed. "He's adjusting my schedule for tomorrow." "Of course," Andrew said, finishing his dinner and rinsing the plate. "I'm going to shower." As he left the kitchen, he heard Darla's hushed voice. "How do you put up with those hands? So rough and calloused. He looks like he fixes engines for a living." Bryn's reply was quiet but clear. "Sometimes I wonder why I'm married down, Mom." Andrew's jaw tightened, but he kept walking. He'd heard worse. The hot water sluiced over Andrew's tired muscles as he replayed the last 5 years of his marriage in his mind. He had met Bryn Holloway at a community fair where his church was running a food drive. Andrew was coordinating donations when she approached with a small contribution and a dazzling smile. She was beautiful, confident, well-dressed, articulate. She seemed fascinated by his no-nonsense approach to life. "You're different," she told him on their third date. "Not trying to impress anyone." "I like that." What she'd really meant, Andrew later realized, was that she saw him as a project, a diamond in the rough she could polish and present to her social circle as her creation. She hadn't bargained for his stubborn authenticity. After their wedding, Bryn had tried to convince him to join her father's investment firm. Leave the trucking business behind. Wear suits. Play golf. Network. "You're too smart to waste your life on highways," she'd argued. Andrew had refused. "I make good money. I own my business. I employ 15 drivers. What's the waste? The bathroom door opened, interrupting his thoughts. Bryn stood there, leaning against the doorframe. Mom's gone, she said. Andrew turned off the water and grabbed a towel. Good. Do you have to antagonize her every time? I said hello and goodbye. That's hardly antagonizing. Bryn crossed her arms. You know what I mean. You could make more of an effort. Andrew stepped out of the shower, wrapping the towel around his waist. Like she does with me. She just wants what's best for me. And that's not me, is it? Andrew moved past her to the bedroom. Bryn followed. That's not what I said, but it's what you think. Andrew pulled on a t-shirt and boxers. You and Darla have made that pretty clear. Don't be dramatic. Bryn sat on the edge of the bed. I just wish you'd consider a different career. Something more stable. Andrew almost laughed. I've never missed a mortgage payment. I paid for your graduate degree. I funded your art studio. What exactly isn't stable? You know what I mean. Something with an office. Regular hours. This again. Andrew shook his head. Bryn, I've been a trucker for 15 years. It's what I do. It's what I'm good at. You were good at a lot of things before we met, she countered. You told me you used to write, that you considered law school. And I chose this. Andrew sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. This is my choice. My life. Our life, Bryn corrected, but her tone lacked conviction. Andrew studied her face, the perfect makeup still intact after a day at her art gallery. The calculated way she'd mussed her hair to look effortlessly stylish. Even in yoga pants and a sweater, she looked like she belonged in a magazine. How's the gallery? He asked, changing the subject. Fine. Bryn stood up. I have a new artist starting next month. Lots of preparation to do. Andrew nodded. I'll be around for the next 4 days if you need help. I'll manage. She walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Andrew, Mom invited us for dinner tomorrow. I said we'd go. Without waiting for his response, she left the room. Andrew lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. 5 years ago, he believed Bryn saw the real him. Now he wondered if she ever had. The next evening, dinner at the Holloway estate was exactly what Andrew expected, a showcase of wealth disguised as family time. Darla's house sat in Portland's West Hills, a sprawling contemporary structure with glass walls that looked out over the city. Andrew parked his pickup truck between a Jaguar and a BMW, ignoring Bryn's grimace at his choice of vehicle. We could have taken my car, she muttered as they walked to the front door. Your car, your mother, your dinner, Andrew replied. At least let me drive myself. Bryn smoothed her designer dress and fixed a smile on her face as the door opened. Darla greeted them with air kisses and critical eyes. Bryn, darling, you look lovely. Andrew, so glad you could make it. I see you drove the truck. It gets me where I need to go, Andrew said with a polite smile. The house was immaculate as always, decorated in shades of white and gray that made Andrew feel like he was walking through an art installation rather than a home. Family photos lined one wall. Bryn at equestrian competitions, graduations, society events. None from her wedding day. Robert is joining us, Darla announced as they entered the dining room. Andrew raised an eyebrow. Robert Chambers was Darla's attorney and occasional dinner guest. His presence at a family dinner seemed calculated. Is there something we're celebrating? Andrew asked. Can't I invite an old friend to dinner? Darla waved dismissively. Robert has been helping me with some foundation work. The Holloway Foundation was Darla's pet project, a charitable organization that seemed to throw more fundraising galas than it did actual charity work. Andrew had always had questions about its operations, but he kept them to himself. Robert stood as they entered, shaking Andrew's hand with a limp grip. Good to see you, Andrew. Still on the road. Still on the road, Andrew confirmed, taking his seat. Dinner conversation flowed around him: exclusive events, mutual acquaintances, real estate investments. Bryn participated enthusiastically, while Andrew ate quietly, observing. Andrew, Bryn tells me you're considering a change of career, Robert said during dessert. Andrew glanced at his wife. Is that what she told you? Bryn looked flustered. I just mentioned you were exploring options. I'm not, Andrew stated flatly. I'm quite content with my current business. Such a shame, Darla murmured. With your intelligence, you could do so much more than drive. Drive, manage a fleet, negotiate contracts, and maintain relationships with national shipping clients, Andrew corrected. But yes, I do drive. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Well, Robert said, clearing his throat, sometimes it's good to consider all options. Life can change quickly. Something in his tone made Andrew look up sharply. The attorney was exchanging a knowing glance with Darla. After dinner, Andrew excused himself to use the bathroom. On his way back, he paused outside Darla's study, hearing hushed voices inside. It's all arranged, Darla was saying. The account is set up. We just need to time this correctly. Mom, I'm not sure about this anymore, Bryn's voice replied. Maybe we should. Don't get cold feet now, Darla interrupted. You've seen how he is. Stubborn. Unmovable. You deserve someone who elevates you, not holds you back. But what if he contests it? With what resources? Robert has the best team in the state. Trust me, darling. By this time next year, you'll be free of this experiment and back where you belong. Andrew stepped away silently, his face expressionless. So that was their plan. To blindside him, cut him loose, take what they could. He returned to the dining room, giving nothing away on the drive home. Bryn was unusually quiet. Nice dinner, Andrew commented. Bryn nodded, looking out the window. Robert seemed interested in my career plans. Bryn shifted in her seat. He's just being friendly. Sure, Andrew said, watching the road. Friendly. That night, as Bryn slept beside him, Andrew lay awake, his mind working through what he'd overheard. It wasn't the first time he'd caught whispers of discontent, but this felt different. More organized, more imminent. He slipped out of bed and went to his home office, a small room Bryn had tried repeatedly to convert into a guest bedroom. From the bottom drawer of his desk, he pulled out a leather-bound notebook and began to write detailed notes of dates, conversations, observations. For the next hour, Andrew documented everything he could remember. Darla's involvement in their marriage, financial discrepancies he'd noticed, Bryn's increasing secrecy, the strange calls that ended when he entered a room. When he finished, he tucked the notebook away and returned to bed. As he drifted off to sleep, one thought remained clear. If Bryn and Darla were planning something, he wouldn't be caught unprepared. 3 days later, Andrew prepared for another long-haul Vancouver to Miami, with stops in between. He loaded his truck methodically, checking and double-checking his equipment. His phone buzzed. A text from Jude Espina, his closest friend since high school and owner of the shop where Andrew maintained his trucks. Beers before you head out? Andrew checked his watch. He had time. Murphy's and 20 at Murphy's Bar was their usual meeting spot, unpretentious, with good burgers and cold beer. Jude was already at their regular booth when Andrew arrived. Looking tired, brother, Jude said, sliding a beer across the table. Long week, Andrew replied, taking a seat. Jude Espina had been Andrew's friend since 9th grade. Where Andrew was reserved and thoughtful, Jude was outspoken and direct. His custom truck shop had grown from a backyard operation to one of the most respected in the Pacific Northwest. How's the princess? Jude asked. He'd never warmed to Bryn, despite Andrew's attempts to bridge that gap. Same as always. Andrew took a sip of his beer. Actually, that's not true. Something's up. Jude leaned forward. What kind of something? Andrew hesitated, then explained what he'd overheard at Darla's house. Jude's expression darkened. They're setting you up, man. Planning to clean you out. Looks that way. And you're just, what? Going to Miami like nothing's happening. Andrew shrugged. What else can I do? Confront her. Call her out. And then what? She denies it, gets more careful, and I lose any advantage I might have. Jude studied his friend. You've got a plan already, don't you? Working on one. Andrew took another drink. Remember your cousin Miguel? The one who became an attorney. Yeah, corporate law or something. Think he'd be willing to talk to me? Confidentially? Jude nodded slowly. Sure. He owes me after I rebuilt his Camaro at cost. Good. Andrew finished his beer. I might need some professional advice. You think it's that serious? I think, Andrew said carefully, that Bryn doesn't realize who she married. Over the next 2 months, Andrew noticed the changes accelerating. Bryn grew more critical, finding fault with everything from his clothes to his table manners. Darla visited more frequently, always with pointed comments about Andrew's shortcomings. And the calls, secretive conversations that ended abruptly when he approached point one evening, returning early from a local delivery, Andrew found Bryn on the phone in their bedroom. "I can't talk now," she said quickly, ending the call as soon as she saw him. "Who was that?" Andrew asked, setting down his keys. "Just gallery business," Bryn replied too quickly. "At 9 p.m., Art doesn't keep office hours, Andrew." She stood up. "Why are you home already?" "Finished early," he said, watching her face. "Expecting someone else?" Bryn's expression hardened. "What's that supposed to mean? You tell me. If you have something to say, just say it." Andrew leaned against the doorframe. "I think you're having an affair." The accusation hung in the air between them. Bryn's face flushed, then paled. "How dare you?" she whispered. "Am I wrong?" Instead of answering, Bryn went on the offensive. "This is rich, coming from you. Gone for weeks at a time, staying in motels across the country. Who knows what you do on the road?" Andrew didn't take the bait. "I drive, Bryn. I sleep. I drive again. I call you every night. And I'm just supposed to believe that? Men like you. Men like me." Andrew's voice remained calm. "What exactly does that mean?" Bryn faltered, then rallied. "You know what? I'm not having this conversation. You want to accuse me based on nothing? Fine. Sleep in the guest room. It's my house, too," Andrew reminded her. "Not for long." Bryn snapped, then immediately looked as if she regretted her words. Andrew nodded slowly. "So that's how it is." "Andrew, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." He turned to leave, then paused. "Just remember, Bryn, I'm not as simple as you think I am." That night, Andrew called Jude from the guest room. "It's happening," he said when his friend answered. "You sure?" She basically admitted it. "And I think there's someone else." Jude swore under his breath. "What's the next move?" "I need you to install something in my truck. And I need to meet with Miguel as soon as possible." "What are you thinking, Andrew?" "I'm thinking it's time to read the fine print," Andrew replied. "And make sure I'm the one holding the contract." 3 days later, Bryn served him with divorce papers, citing emotional abandonment and irreconcilable differences. The next morning, she'd moved in with her mother. What she didn't know was that Andrew had been expecting this move and had been preparing for it all along. The Portland County Courthouse buzzed with activity as Andrew entered the imposing building. He straightened his tie, a simple blue one, not the designer labels Bryn had always tried to force on him, and checked his watch. Right on time. Outside courtroom 3B, he spotted Jude waiting, dressed in his version of formal. A clean button-down shirt and the only pair of non-work jeans he owned. "You ready for this?" Jude asked, clapping a hand on Andrew's shoulder. "Been ready," Andrew replied. They entered the courtroom together, and Andrew immediately spotted Bryn sitting at the front with her attorney, an expensive-looking man in a tailored suit. Darla sat directly behind them, whispering something in Bryn's ear. All three looked up as Andrew entered, their expressions a mixture of contempt and confidence. Andrew took his seat at the opposite table where Miguel Espina waited. Jude's cousin had agreed to represent him, working for a reduced fee as a favor. What Miguel lacked in flashy credentials, he made up for in meticulous preparation and a shrewd legal mind. "They look smug," Miguel murmured. "Let them," Andrew replied. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Regina Martinez entered. A no-nonsense woman in her 60s, she reviewed the papers before her with a neutral expression. "Initial divorce proceedings for Holloway Wade versus Wade," she announced. "I understand the petitioner is seeking an expedited judgment." Bryn's attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor. James Whitfield, representing Bryn Holloway Wade. We're requesting immediate division of assets and spousal support during the pendency of these proceedings. My client has been financially dependent on her husband throughout their marriage and requires immediate support." Judge Martinez nodded, and the respondent, Miguel rose. "Miguel Espina, representing Andrew Wade, Your Honor. We contest both the characterization of the marriage and the request for emergency support." The judge peered over her glasses. "Very well. Ms. Holloway Wade, please approach the stand." Bryn glided to the witness stand, the picture of elegant distress in a conservative navy dress. After being sworn in, she composed herself with practiced vulnerability. Whitfield began his questioning. "Mrs. Holloway Wade, can you describe your marriage to the respondent?" "We've been married for 5 years," Bryn replied, her voice soft but clear. "At first it was good. I thought Andrew had potential. But over time, he became increasingly distant. His job took him away for weeks at a time, leaving me alone to maintain our home and social obligations. And how did this affect you? Bryn dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I felt abandoned, isolated. Andrew refused to consider a more suitable career despite my family's connections. He preferred living in motels and truck stops to building a proper life with me. From his seat, Andrew watched her performance with detachment. It was exactly what he'd expected. Did Mr. Wade provide financially for your household? Whitfield continued. He paid the bills, Bryn conceded, but he controlled all our finances. I had to ask for money for basic necessities. It was humiliating. Andrew raised an eyebrow, but remained silent. Miguel made a note. And why are you seeking emergency support? I've had to move in with my mother. I have no independent income. The gallery where I work is a nonprofit. I volunteer there. Andrew knows this, yet he's frozen our joint accounts. No further questions, Your Honor, Whitfield concluded. Judge Martinez looked to Miguel. Cross-examination, Mr. Espina? Miguel approached the stand. Mrs. Holloway Wade, you stated that you volunteer at an art gallery. Is that correct? Yes, the West Side Modern Art Collective. I'm the curator. And who founded this gallery? Bryn shifted slightly. My mother established it as part of the Holloway Foundation's community outreach. I see. And who sits on the board of the Holloway Foundation? My mother is the chairperson. I serve as secretary. And the foundation pays you nothing for your services? It's a volunteer position, Bryn insisted. Miguel nodded, consulting his notes. Mrs. Holloway Wade, did you complete a master's degree during your marriage to my client? Yes, in fine arts. And who paid for that degree? Bryn hesitated. Andrew contributed to my education, yes. Contributed or paid in full. The tuition was $63,000 over 2 years, correct? Approximately, yes. And did you maintain a checking account at First National Bank during your marriage? Bryn looked confused by the shift. Yes. With an average monthly balance of how much? I don't recall exactly. Miguel handed a document to the judge and Whitfield. Your Honor, these are bank statements for an account in Mrs. Holloway Wade's name only. You'll note the average balance over the past 3 years has been approximately $30,000. Whitfield stood. Objection. These documents weren't provided in discovery. They were included in Exhibit C. Counsel, Miguel replied calmly. Page 47. The judge reviewed the documents. Objection overruled. The witness will answer. Bryn looked flustered. That's my personal account, with $30,000 in it, Miguel clarified. Yet you testified you have no independent income and must ask your husband for basic necessities. Those funds are for emergencies, Bryn argued. Like the emergency of your divorce. Miguel asked mildly. Mrs. Holloway Wade, did you also maintain a credit card in your name only? Yes, but with a credit limit of $50,000 and current charges of approximately $23,000 for purchases at Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, and several luxury hotels. Bryn's composure cracked slightly. I have certain standards to maintain. For appearances, of course. One more question. Who made the payments on this credit card? Bryn's gaze shifted to Darla, who was watching with a tight expression. Andrew did. Thank you. No further questions. As Bryn returned to her seat, Andrew noticed her whispering furiously to Whitfield, who looked increasingly concerned. The judge turned to Andrew's table. Mr. Wade, please approach the stand. Andrew was sworn in, his manner calm and direct. Miguel began, Mr. Wade, what do you do for a living? I own Wade Logistics, Andrew replied. We're a specialized transportation company with 16 trucks and 23 employees. I started as a driver 15 years ago and built the business from the ground up. And what is your annual income? Approximately $220,000, depending on contracts. During your marriage to Bryn Holloway Wade, how were finances handled? Andrew leaned forward slightly. We maintained joint accounts for household expenses and investments. Bryn also kept her personal accounts, which I funded monthly with $5,000 for her discretionary spending. I paid all household bills, her credit cards, her education costs, and provided $100,000 for her to establish an art studio. Did you ever deny Mrs. Holloway Wade access to funds? Never. She had full access to our joint accounts and her own separate funds. Miguel nodded. Mr. Wade, Mrs. Holloway Wade characterized you as living in motels and truck stops. Could you address that? I'm on the road about 180 days a year, Andrew explained. My company specializes in high-value, time-sensitive shipments that require owner-operator handling. When I'm driving, I stay in prearranged accommodations along established routes. It's a professional routine, not a lifestyle choice. And when you're not driving, I'm home, managing the business and maintaining our household. Miguel approached with a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter this into evidence. What is it, counselor? Judge Martinez asked. A post-nuptial agreement signed by both parties 3 years ago. Across the courtroom, Andrew saw Bryn's face drain of color. Whitfield scrambled to review his notes. Objection, Whitfield called. No post-nuptial agreement was disclosed in the initial filings. Miguel remained unruffled. Your Honor, the agreement was filed with the county recorder 3 years ago. It's a matter of public record. We included reference to it in our response to the petition, paragraph 17. The judge examined the document. Objection overruled. Mr. Espina, proceed. Miguel turned back to Andrew. Can you explain the circumstances of this agreement? Andrew nodded. 3 years into our marriage, Bryn expressed concern about protecting her trust fund and future inheritance. She asked for a post-nuptial agreement to ensure her family assets remained separate property. And you agreed to this? I did, with some conditions of my own. What conditions were those? Andrew's gaze briefly met Bryn's across the courtroom. That any marital assets I brought to the table or acquired through my business would remain mine in the event of a divorce. And that if either party engaged in extramarital affairs or financial impropriety, they would forfeit claims to joint marital property. Whitfield was on his feet again. Your Honor, my client wasn't properly represented when this agreement was signed. We challenge its validity. Miguel held up the final page of the document. The agreement was prepared by Sutton and Myers and witnessed by a notary. Mrs. Holloway Wade's signature appears alongside the signature of her attorney at the time, Rebecca Sutton. The judge examined the document. The agreement appears properly executed, Mr. Whitfield. Your objection is noted but overruled. Andrew watched as Bryn leaned over to whisper frantically to her attorney. Darla's face had turned to stone. Miguel continued, Mr. Wade, Mrs. Holloway Wade has characterized you as controlling and absent. How would you describe your marriage? Andrew took a moment before answering. I believe we had a partnership. Different strengths, different interests, but a partnership. I supported Bryn's educational and professional goals without question. I accepted her family's reservations about me. I tried to build a life that would satisfy us both. And when did you realize that wasn't the case? About 6 months ago, I began noticing changes. Secret phone calls, unexplained absences, critical comments about my career, my clothes, my friends. Then I overheard Bryn and her mother discussing plans to, in their words, free her from this experiment. Whitfield stood again. Objection. Hearsay. Sustained. The judge ruled. The jury will disregard the last statement. Miguel adjusted smoothly. Mr. Wade, do you believe your wife has been faithful during your marriage? Bryn visibly tensed. No, Andrew said firmly. I do not. And what is the basis for that belief? Andrew's expression remained neutral. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts to a number belonging to Nolan Fisher, her personal trainer, often late at night or when I was on the road. Hotel charges on her credit card for dates when she claimed to be at art conferences, and photographs taken by a licensed investigator showing them together at a vacation rental in Cannon Beach 3 months ago. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Whitfield looked blindsided. Bryn's face crumpled in a mixture of shock and anger. Darla sat rigid, her knuckles white against her designer purse. Miguel handed a folder to the judge. Your Honor, these are the phone records, credit card statements, and investigators' report referenced by my client. Judge Martinez reviewed the documents with a deepening frown. These appear to be in order, Mr. Espina. Please continue. Mr. Wade, given these circumstances, what are you seeking from these proceedings? Andrew sat straight in his chair. I'm requesting enforcement of our post-nuptial agreement. According to its terms, Bryn's infidelity nullifies her claims to joint property and additional support. No further questions, Your Honor. Whitfield approached for cross-examination, visibly rattled. Mr. Wade, you travel extensively for work, correct? Yes. And during these extended absences, who could verify your whereabouts or activities? Andrew understood immediately where this was heading. My truck is equipped with GPS tracking as required by Department of Transportation regulations. My routes, stops, and hours are electronically logged and submitted to regulatory authorities. That confirms your truck's location, not yours, Whitfield pressed. I'm also the only authorized driver for my vehicle, Andrew replied. And I installed a cabin camera system last year for security purposes. The footage is stored on a secure server. Whitfield paused, regrouping. You mentioned this post-nuptial agreement. Isn't it convenient that it contains clauses so favorable to you in the current situation? The clauses apply equally to both parties, Andrew pointed out. I would be subject to the same penalties for infidelity or financial misconduct. And you expect the court to believe you suggested these specific clauses 3 years ago, somehow anticipating the current situation? Andrew met his gaze steadily. I suggested them because I believe in consequences for broken commitments, Mr. Whitfield. I didn't anticipate anything. I simply established boundaries. Whitfield tried another approach. Isn't it true that you resented Mrs. Holloway Wade's family wealth and social standing? No. I respected her background, but wasn't interested in pretending to be something I'm not. Yet you consistently refused opportunities to advance socially or professionally through her family's connections. I prefer to succeed on my own merits, Andrew replied simply. Frustrated, Whitfield switched tactics again. Let's talk about your evidence of alleged infidelity. You hired a private investigator to follow your wife? After I found substantial evidence suggesting an affair, yes. Some might call that invasive and controlling behavior. Andrew didn't flinch. Some might call having an affair invasive and controlling behavior too. A few chuckles sounded from the gallery. The judge tapped her gavel lightly. No further questions, Whitfield concluded abruptly. Judge Martinez called a 1-hour recess. As people filtered out of the courtroom, Andrew remained seated, watching Bryn huddled with her attorney and mother. Darla's expression was thunderous, her gesture sharp as she berated Whitfield in hushed tones. You did good, Miguel said quietly. They weren't expecting any of this. They underestimated me, Andrew replied. They always have. During recess, Andrew stepped outside for fresh air. He found a quiet corner of the courthouse steps and took a moment to gather his thoughts. The morning had gone as planned, but he knew the real battle was still ahead. Andrew. He turned to find Bryn standing a few feet away. She'd removed her suit jacket, and he noticed her hands trembling slightly. What do you want, Bryn? She glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. We need to talk. This doesn't have to get ugly. It already is ugly, Andrew pointed out. You made it ugly when you decided to cheat on me and then try to take everything I've built. It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. His tone wasn't angry, just matter of fact. Bryn hesitated. I was unhappy. You were gone all the time. We wanted different things. Then you should have asked for a divorce. Honestly, directly. Instead, you and Darla plotted behind my back. You lied. You cheated. You tried to humiliate me. Mom can be persuasive. Andrew shook his head. Don't blame Darla. You're an adult, Bryn. You made your choices. So what now? You embarrass me in court? Ruin my reputation? Is that what you want? What I wanted was a wife who respected me, Andrew said quietly. But we're past that now. We could settle this privately, Bryn suggested, lowering her voice. Come to an arrangement, like the one you and your mother arranged, where I lose everything and crawl away quietly. Bryn flushed. That's not. It's exactly what you planned, Andrew cut her off. I heard you and Darla talking that night at her house. By this time next year, you'll be free of this experiment. Remember saying that. Bryn's expression confirmed his words. Here's what's going to happen, Andrew continued calmly. We're going back into that courtroom. The judge will review our post-nuptial agreement and all the evidence. And then you'll leave with exactly what you brought to this marriage or trust fund, your family connections, and your false sense of superiority. You can't do this, Bryn whispered. I already have. Andrew checked his watch. Recess is almost over. You might want to fix your makeup before we go back in. Appearances matter to you, remember? He walked past her, back toward the courthouse doors. Behind him, he heard her choked sob, but he didn't turn around. When court resumed, Judge Martinez addressed both parties. Having reviewed the evidence presented, I find the post-nuptial agreement valid and enforceable. Mr. Whitfield, do you have any additional witnesses? Whitfield stood. Your Honor, we'd like to call Darla Holloway. Darla approached the stand, elegant and composed in an expensive suit. After being sworn in, she sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. Ms. Holloway, Whitfield began, can you describe your observations of your daughter's marriage to Mr. Wade? Darla's voice was cultured and precise. From the beginning, I had concerns. Andrew never seemed interested in integrating into our family or social circle. He maintained this blue-collar identity, despite opportunities for advancement. And how did this affect your daughter? Bryn tried very hard to make the marriage work, Darla said, her sympathy for her daughter evident. She supported his trucking business, tolerated his extended absences, even defended him when friends questioned her choice of husband. Did you witness any controlling behavior from Mr. Wade? Darla nodded gravely. He insisted on managing their finances. He refused to attend important social and charitable events. He isolated Bryn from her natural peer group by maintaining a lifestyle beneath her upbringing. Andrew watched him passively. Darla was good, sincere, concerned, careful not to overplay her hand. Thank you, Ms. Holloway, Whitfield concluded. No further questions. Miguel approached for cross-examination. Ms. Holloway, how often did you visit your daughter and Mr. Wade at their home? Regularly, weekly when possible. And in those visits, did you observe Mr. Wade being verbally or physically abusive to your daughter? Darla hesitated. Not in the conventional sense, no. Did you ever see him prevent her from spending money, seeing friends, or pursuing her interests? He was more subtle in his control. Please answer the question directly, Miguel pressed. Did you ever witness Mr. Wade preventing your daughter from spending money, seeing friends, or pursuing her interests? No, Darla admitted reluctantly. Miguel nodded. Ms. Holloway, you're the chairperson of the Holloway Foundation, correct? Darla looked surprised at the change in direction. Yes, for 15 years now. And this foundation receives tax-exempt status as a charitable organization. Of course. Could you explain the foundation's relationship with GreenPath Logistics? Darla's composed facade cracked slightly. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Miguel handed her a document. This is an IRS Form 990 filed by the Holloway Foundation 3 years ago. It shows payments of approximately $450,000 to GreenPath Logistics for transportation services. Yes, they assisted with distribution of charitable goods, Darla replied, regaining her composure. Ms. Holloway, are you aware that GreenPath Logistics was incorporated just 2 weeks before receiving this contract? And that its listed business address is a virtual office in Delaware with no physical presence? The courtroom grew quiet. Darla's fingers tightened around the document. I don't manage the day-to-day operations, she said stiffly. Miguel continued relentlessly. Are you also aware that the registered agent for GreenPath Logistics is Robert Chambers, who serves as both your personal attorney and the Holloway Foundation's legal counsel? Objection. Whitfield called. Relevance. I'm establishing a pattern of financial irregularity, Your Honor, Miguel explained. It bears directly on the credibility of Ms. Holloway's testimony regarding Mr. Wade's character and financial management. I'll allow it, Judge Martinez ruled. The witness will answer. Darla's voice was tight. Robert handles many clients. I wasn't aware of every entity he represents. One final question, Miguel said. Ms. Holloway, did you use Mr. Wade's social security number to open a bank account for GreenPath Logistics without his knowledge or consent? The courtroom fell completely silent. Darla's face paled. That's absurd, she whispered. Miguel handed another document to the judge. Your Honor, this is a bank statement for an account at First Security Bank, opened in the name of Green Path Logistics using Andrew Wade's social security number, but with Darla Holloway as the sole signatory. Mr. Wade discovered this when reviewing his credit report last year. Judge Martinez examined the document with a deepening frown. Ms. Holloway, are you aware that using another person's social security number for financial purposes without their consent constitutes identity theft? Darla looked genuinely alarmed now. There must be some mistake. I would never. Your Honor, Miguel interrupted. We have additional documentation showing systematic misuse of Mr. Wade's personal information to establish credit lines and business entities without his knowledge. We believe these activities constitute both identity theft and potential tax fraud. Whitfield was on his feet. Your Honor, these allegations are beyond the scope of this proceeding. If Mr. Espina has evidence of criminal activity, he should take it to the proper authorities. Already done, Miguel replied calmly. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division has been provided with all relevant documentation. Darla half rose from the witness stand. This is outrageous. I came here to support my daughter, not to be accused of— Sit down, Ms. Holloway, Judge Martinez ordered sharply. Mr. Espina, while I appreciate your thoroughness, please limit your questions to matters directly related to the divorce proceedings. Of course, Your Honor. Miguel turned back to Darla. Ms. Holloway, given that you appear to have committed identity theft using Mr. Wade's personal information, would you say you have a bias against him that might color your testimony today? Darla's composure shattered completely. This is a setup, she hissed. Andrew was nothing before he married my daughter. Nothing. No further questions, Miguel said, returning to his seat. Whitfield declined redirect examination, and Darla was excused from the stand. She returned to her seat, visibly shaken, as Judge Martinez called for closing arguments. Whitfield went first, attempting to salvage his case. He emphasized Bryn's contributions to the marriage, questioned the timing of Andrew's evidence, and tried to separate Darla's alleged financial improprieties from Bryn's divorce petition. When Miguel rose for his closing, his approach was methodical and devastating. Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about honesty and consequences. Mr. Wade entered his marriage in good faith. He worked hard, provided generously, and upheld his commitments. In return, Mrs. Holloway Wade engaged in an extramarital affair while she and her mother plotted to extract maximum financial benefit from a marriage they both viewed as temporary and beneath them. He held up the post-nuptial agreement. This document, which Mrs. Holloway Wade herself initiated, clearly states the consequences of infidelity and financial misconduct. The evidence of both is overwhelming and unrefuted. He gestured toward Andrew. Mr. Wade isn't seeking vengeance. He's simply asking for the enforcement of an agreement that Mrs. Holloway Wade voluntarily signed with proper legal representation. He wants to retain the business he built before and during the marriage, the home he principally paid for, and to move forward with his life. Miguel glanced at Bryn and Darla. Perhaps the most telling aspect of this case is that Mrs. Holloway Wade and her mother consistently underestimated Mr. Wade. They saw his occupation as beneath them, his intelligence as limited, his resources as vulnerable. They failed to recognize that integrity and diligence are qualities that matter in business, in marriage, and in court. He turned back to the judge. We ask that you enforce the post-nuptial agreement according to its terms, dismiss the request for spousal support, and award Mr. Wade his reasonable attorney's fees as provided for in the agreement. Thank you. Judge Martinez called another brief recess to review her notes. As they waited, Andrew sat quietly beside Miguel, watching Bryn and Darla in heated discussion with Whitfield. The attorney looked increasingly defeated. When the judge returned, her expression was grave. Having reviewed all evidence and arguments presented, I find the following. First, the postnuptial agreement between Andrew Wade and Bryn Holloway Wade is valid and enforceable. Second, there is clear and convincing evidence that Mrs. Holloway Wade engaged in extramarital relations in violation of said agreement. Third, there is substantial evidence suggesting financial impropriety by Darla Holloway involving Mr. Wade's personal information. She looked directly at Bryn. Therefore, in accordance with the terms of the postnuptial agreement, Mrs. Holloway Wade forfeits any claim to joint marital property, including the family residence and Mr. Wade's business interests. Her request for spousal support is denied. The judge turned to Darla. Ms. Holloway, while not formally a party to these proceedings, you should be aware that I am referring the evidence of identity theft and potential tax fraud to the district attorney's office for review. I suggest you retain separate counsel immediately. Finally, she addressed both parties. Mr. Wade is awarded his reasonable attorney's fees as provided in the agreement. This court grants the petition for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences, effective immediately. Are there any questions? Whitfield rose weakly. Your Honor, we intend to appeal. That is your right, counsel, the judge interrupted. But be advised that appeals based on evidence that was available but not presented at trial are rarely successful. This matter is concluded. With a final tap of her gavel, Judge Martinez left the bench. For a moment, no one moved. Then Bryn stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face, and rushed from the courtroom. Darla followed, her earlier composure completely gone. Whitfield gathered his papers in dejected silence. Andrew sat still, processing the outcome. It had gone exactly as he'd planned, yet he felt no triumph, only a deep weariness. Jude approached from the gallery, clapping him on the shoulder. It's done, brother. Andrew nodded, rising slowly. It's done. As they left the courtroom, Andrew glanced back once at the empty witness stand where he'd finally been able to speak his truth. 5 years of his life, reduced to exhibits and testimony. He turned away and walked out into the afternoon sun, ready to leave the shadows behind. 1 week after the divorce was finalized, Andrew returned to his house officially and completely as now and found it exactly as he'd left it, minus Bryn's personal items. She'd taken her clothes, jewelry, and art, but left everything else. No sentimental attachments. Apparently, he walked through the rooms slowly, noting the empty spaces where her photographs had hung, the vacant spot on the dresser where her perfumes had stood, the half-empty closet. The house felt larger somehow, as if her absence created space rather than emptiness. In the kitchen, he found a single wine glass in the sink, her parting gesture, perhaps. He washed it, dried it, and put it away. Then he opened his laptop and began researching realtors. The house, despite being his legal victory, held too many false memories. He wanted a fresh start. His phone rang. Jude's name appeared on the screen. Hey, Andrew answered, setting the laptop aside. Where are you? Jude asked without preamble. At the house. What? Turn on the news. Channel 8. Andrew found the remote and switched on the television. The local news was running a breaking story. Prominent philanthropist under investigation. The camera showed federal agents removing boxes of documents from Darla's mansion. A reporter stood in the foreground, explaining that the Holloway Foundation was under investigation for tax fraud, identity theft, and misappropriation of charitable funds. Holy shit, Andrew muttered. It gets better, Jude said. Keep watching. The scene cut to a brief statement from an IRS spokesperson. This investigation began with evidence suggesting systematic abuse of a charitable organization's tax-exempt status, including the creation of shell companies to divert funds for personal use. Did you know this was coming? Andrew asked into the phone. Miguel mentioned the IRS was serious about their investigation, but I didn't expect it to move this fast. Andrew watched as the camera caught a glimpse of Darla being escorted to a car, her face partially covered by a designer scarf. No sign of Bryn. What about Robert Chambers? Andrew asked, remembering Darla's attorney and co-conspirator. Also under investigation. Apparently, he's been cooperating with authorities, throwing Darla under the bus to save himself. Andrew switched off the television. I didn't expect all this. You didn't cause it, Jude reminded him. You just uncovered what was already there. Yeah. Andrew sighed. Still, any regrets? Andrew considered the question carefully. No, they made their choices. So did I. After ending the call, Andrew returned to his laptop. He didn't feel satisfaction watching Darla's downfall, Only a quiet confirmation that justice sometimes arrived on its own schedule point 3 days later. Andrew hit the road again. The familiar weight of the truck beneath him, the open highway stretching ahead, this was where he had always found clarity. His first stop was Jude's shop, where a group of men were gathered around a partially dismantled engine. Jude spotted him and waved him over. "Andrew, meet the crew," he said, gesturing to the men. Former Marines, trying to figure out their next move. Andrew shook hands with each of them: Jim, Marcus, Dwayne, and Tony. Their grips were firm, their eyes assessing but respectful. "Jude says you run a trucking operation," Jim said. "Good money in that." "Decent," Andrew replied. "Better if you own the truck. Hard work, long hours, but you're your own boss on the road." "These guys need something stable," Jude explained. "The transition to civilian life hasn't been easy." Andrew studied the men more carefully, noting their disciplined posture, their attention to detail as they worked on the engine. He recognized something in them, a sense of purpose, seeking direction. "Ever consider a career in logistics?" he asked. Later, over coffee in Jude's office, Andrew outlined his idea. "A mentorship program. We take veterans, train them, help them get their commercial licenses, maybe eventually help them buy their own rigs." Jude leaned back in his chair. "That's a big commitment." "How about time now?" Andrew said. "And the business is stable enough to expand." "What brought this on?" Andrew considered the question. "I spent 5 years with someone who saw no value in what I do. Maybe it's time to show others the opportunities one found. And it has nothing to do with needing something positive after everything that happened." Jude asked knowingly. Andrew smiled slightly. "Maybe that too." Over the next month, Andrew developed a formal program. He partnered with a veterans organization, secured some preliminary funding, and set up a training schedule. For veterans, including the men he'd met at Jude's shop, signed on as the first participants. That he also sold the house, purchased a smaller place closer to his business headquarters, and resumed his regular routes. The rhythm of the road was therapeutic, miles of asphalt unwinding beneath his wheels, changing landscapes, solitude without loneliness. He heard about Bryn occasionally. She'd moved to Seattle, taken a position at another gallery. No mention of Nolan, her trainer. Darla's legal troubles continued to mount as investigators uncovered more irregularities in the foundation's finances. Andrew followed the news with detached interest, like watching a storm pass over distant hills. Their lives no longer intersected with his, until 6 months later, when he flew to Miami for a business conference. The Portland International Airport was crowded that morning. Andrew checked his bag, made his way through security, and headed toward his gate. As he passed a luxury car rental counter, he glanced over and froze. Bryn stood behind the counter, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing the company's uniform shirt. She was helping a customer, her smile professional but strained. She looked thinner, older somehow, despite the carefully applied makeup. Andrew could have walked past unnoticed, could have pretended not to see her. Instead, he paused, waiting for her to finish with the customer. When she looked up and saw him, her expression cycled through shock, embarrassment, and resignation. "Andrew," she said quietly. "Bryn." He nodded, noting the absence of her designer clothes and jewelry. "Working here now." She straightened, a flash of her old pride surfacing. "Yes. Since the foundation's assets were frozen, I've had to make some adjustments." "I see." An awkward silence stretched between them. "Darla?" he finally asked. "Under house arrest pending trial," Bryn replied, her voice tight. "The legal fees have nearly bankrupted her." Andrew nodded. "And Nolan?" A bitter smile crossed Bryn's face. "Gone. Turns out he was more interested in the Holloway name than in me." "I'm sorry to hear that," Andrew said, surprising himself with his sincerity. Bryn studied his face. "Are you really?" "No one deserves to be used, Bryn. Not even you." She flinched slightly at his words. "I suppose I had that coming." Another customer approached the counter, saving them from further conversation. "I should go," Andrew said, gesturing toward the gates. "Take care of yourself." As he turned to leave, Bryn called after him. "Andrew." He looked back. "You look good," she said. "Happy." Andrew considered this. "I am," he realized. Good luck, Bryn. He walked away, aware of her eyes, following him. He didn't look back again on the plane. Andrew reflected on the encounter. Bryn had fallen far from her privileged perch, yet somehow seemed more real now than during their marriage. The facade had cracked, revealing the person beneath flawed, struggling, human. He felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only a calm certainty that he had escaped something toxic. The life she and Darla had planned for him controlled, diminished, eventually discarded, was no longer a threat. As the plane took off, Andrew watched Portland disappear beneath the clouds. New horizons waited, business opportunities, the veteran mentorship program, perhaps eventually a relationship based on mutual respect rather than social calculation. He'd been right that day in court. Bryn and Darla had consistently underestimated him. They'd seen only the surface: calloused hands, worn boots, a blue-collar job, and missed everything beneath. His intelligence, his patience, his capacity to observe and learn, his unwillingness to be anyone's experiment. The truck cab that Bryn had mocked as his mobile home had indeed become a command center for justice, a place where, mile by solitary mile, he documented the truth and prepared for the reckoning that would eventually come. Andrew leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes as the plane leveled off above the clouds. The fine print had mattered after all. In contracts, in marriages, in life, that he hadn't just survived betrayal, he'd buried it under asphalt, dignity, and one ironclad contract. Now he was driving away from their wreckage and rebuilding his future 1 mile at a time.